when I am happy and everything's going well, you know, at the beach with my family, I'm surfing, hanging out with friends, there's no reason to write music, you know?
Yeah.
It's only when like I'm depressed, I'm lonely, I'm scared, I'm frustrated. And that's when I pick up my guitar and look for answers.
Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome to this week's edition of the Stay Human podcast. I'm super excited because I've been trying to get with this cat for like, it seems like months, man. We all our schedules kept colliding and going the wrong way. We had a few different times set up, but we finally made it happen, and I'm pumped about it. I was able to do a deep dive on their music the last couple of days. So I want to encourage you to do the same at the end of this podcast. And as always, we want to thank the great Gibson Guitars for sponsoring the show today. They are doing some incredible stuff. So if you ever happen to be in Nashville, go check out the Gibson Garage, and you can handle all these amazing ancient instruments. I mean, I say ancient because the electric guitar, the first one was like in 1959 that they invented. But just an amazing museum that you could get your hands on the gear there. So it's a really cool place to be. Our guest today is a Grammy Award-winning singer, songwriter, and rock star, as well as a devoted father, a diehard Beatles fan, and surf junkie. As the frontman of the internationally renowned band Switchfoot, he's touched fans through his figurative and emotional storytelling lyricism, which explores a myriad of intimate topics in his music, including politics, religion, love, sex, among many others. And please welcome to this podcast, Jon Foreman. How you doing, Jon?
Good. I need that introduction every time I play. I just going to record that.
Isn't it cool, though, to kind of like listen to what other people have listed of your accomplishments? You know, like as musicians, we go through like years or months or decades, and we just kind of like go after it. You know what I mean? And then you hear back and you hear like this, all the stuff that you do put into one paragraph, and it's kind of you know, impressive and humbling and kind of cool to hear it.
Yeah, it's strange, man. I want to add one thing to that.
Sure.
I set up a show. I used to, you know, be a stage tech at UCSD, and you guys rolled through, and I was one of the guys that helped put mic stands together and all that. So
awesome.
That's part of my resume right there.
There you go. I'm not sure how many gigs that'll get you in the future, but I'm honored that you helped out, because I remember playing there, and that was a fun experience for us. So. Hey, where are you right now?
I'm at home in San Diego, California.
Nice. Is that where you've always lived? Did you grow up there? And
yeah, so I was born in California, kind of up in the mountains, and then we moved to Boston, and then we moved to Virginia, and then we moved back west. So I feel like I got to experience a little bit of the North, a little bit of the South, and then, you know, certainly California's home, but I feel like I got a taste of what America is, you know. I skipped the middle bit, but East Coast, West Coast.
Yeah, it's good. You know, to have that kind of experience where you get to live in different places. I mean, I'm living in Bali now, and my son is growing up here. My youngest son is growing up here, and you know, his frame of reference for the world is so unique because he's got, you know, I'm American, my wife is Canadian, but her family is Persian and, you know, really culturally Persian. But he's growing up in this other country, and, you know, he's learning Indonesian to speak Indonesian as he's speaking English. And I just, you know, I just try to like imagine out in a few years who he's going to be and what he's going to be like having had that experience. How do you think it shaped you to be somebody who, you know, moved around a little bit? How old were you when you were that age? Were you the age of like having to make new friends, or were you just really little? Or
yeah, so like I moved to Boston when I was 5, and then Virginia when I was like 13, and then moved back here like freshman in high school.
Okay, so you definitely had some like growing up years, moving around, switching schools, switching neighborhoods.
Yeah. And I think whenever I'm talking to people around, you know, kind of in their formative years, I'm always like, you the best education you can get is to travel. I think, I look back on years and years of touring and being fortunate enough to go to, Bali or in India, South Africa, wherever. And you realize there's so many different human experiences, and you begin to think maybe, you begin to rethink your own kind of unknowingly small-minded approach to a situation that you had no idea that it was only one of a myriad of ways of looking at the world. And I love every time I travel to have my mind blown by different understanding of the world,
Yeah. I remember my mother-in-law sent me this quote, and it was something to the effect of, when we think of like all the religions or different ways of being on the planet, different cultures, that wouldn't it be even far more amazing if there was, or far more impossible to comprehend if there was actually only one way that the universe or God or whoever you call it expected us all to be. It would be really unlikely that would be the case with, the thousands of different ways of being. And I feel like as I've grown and gone around the world and see different ways of being, it's like, the more I see, the less I know. The more I see, the more questions I have, and the more curiosity gets piqued in me. And that's what I love about it. And, I was kind of, similar like you, like I really didn't get out on my own except through music, and going to different cities and going to different micro cultures, I guess you'd call them, in different towns. And there's a certain scene here and another scene there. It would open my eyes a lot. But then when I started to go out into the greater world, and see other countries and other cultures and other ways of living, it really changed the way that I thought about my art and how I was expressing myself. And I know, just knowing your guys' music and how passionate you guys are about the deep dive that you do when you go into the record making process. How did that start for you? Like, at what point in your life did you find that spark in music, that it was something that really fed your soul?
That's a good question. I think, oddly enough, we're talking about moving. I think one of the moves in particular was kind of a formative time in my life. Like coming to California, I was pretty confident kid, I thought I'd make friends pretty quick, and I thought I'd be fine. And then, I entered freshman year not knowing anyone, and like I couldn't seem to make friends. I developed a stuttering problem, and I was like, like it was a really dark season for me where I would eat my lunch, and you realize like it only takes like 15 minutes to eat lunch if you don't have anyone to talk to, so like the rest of the lunch period, you're just kind of walking around and try not to look like you're walking around alone. But I began to, really dive into music, and music for me, as I began to write my own stuff, began this place. It opened up this place where I could be honest in ways that I couldn't in a conversation. And in a conversation with another human, I would stutter, I would be awkward, I wouldn't be able to talk about the deeper issues. But in music, I was able to access these places, and in front of strangers, I'd be able to communicate really clearly and effectively doubts, fears, anything, and so that was ninth grade for me, where music kind of unlocked a different form of communication. And ever since then, that's kind of been like my best way, right? Yeah.
Your therapy. How has or when you were a kid growing up, were there musical instruments in your house, or how did you first, when you say at grade 9 that you started to come into like doing your own thing, but before that, what was music like in your house?
Yeah, there were always music, my mom and dad, both musicians, which is kind of, when you're a kid, you don't know that that's weird, you just think that's what people do. We had a piano. My parents both played piano. They both played guitar. They both were a part of bands and music in college.
Wow.
And so that's just how I grew up. And I didn't know it was weird. I just kind of thought, yeah, of course, everyone plays music. That's what you do.
Yeah.
And it didn't really come up that often, like Christmas time, you'd all play songs together and it's just what you did. But yeah, that's how I came to it. But it was very, when I talk about travel, I go to India and I encounter these families where your last name tells people what you are. If you're a butler, a cooper, a cobbler, whatever it is, that last name tells you what you are. And a lot of the families there, their last name they're musicians by trade, and I feel like that my American story was the closest thing to that, where, I just grew up in a family of musicians. That's just what we did.
Yeah. That was the family trade. And tell me do you have siblings, or what was your household like growing up?
Yeah. So my brother, who's in Switchfoot with me, he and I, typical brothers, fighting, skateboarding, surfing, fighting, playing guitar, whatever it is, but like there's always a friction with brothers. And we were in a Led Zeppelin cover band in junior high. And that was the first time we ever played music together. But yeah, like interested in a lot of the same things. And I think pushing each other in all the best and worst ways. And he still is one of my dearest friends. I love him and absolutely would not be who I am if it weren't for his influence in my life.
Mm-hmm. What was the hardest thing for you? When you think back on growing up as a kid, you describe, being that lonely, kid in ninth grade. How did you find your way through it? Like, what was the hardest thing for you to work on it, as a teen?
I think, even now, like identity is so crucial for anyone, who am I?
Yeah.
And then out of that, maybe some form of volitional intent and direction. Who am I then? Where am I going? And then maybe how am I going to get there? And I think when I began to find my meaning and my purpose in some form of worth that's driven by, mustering up a new song or something, it can be a really dangerous thing. I think when I can I think that's why surfing and meditation, prayer, encountering other people that are on connected to a deeper story, a bigger story than just the present, then I'm able to remember that I am a part of a much bigger narrative than just my own stomach or something like that, So I think that in high school and even today, I think when I am reminded that I am a beloved, child of God, then that's a much better place to begin my day than like, oh, I got to figure out how to get faster on the freeway or the internet or something,
Yeah. What is your musical mission? I mean, do you have something like a mantra, like, here's my mission, my statement?
Oh, we've said for years, life is short, live it well. That's kind of been our mantra. And I think so much of what we do is about not so much the question, like the destination and the answer, but the question and the conversation. I love the idea that music can be the beginning to a much bigger story. And so many of our songs are actually, I feel like, just a starting point, and looking for hope. I usually, when I am happy and everything's going well, I'm like, at the beach with my family, I'm surfing, hanging out with friends at a barbecue. There's no reason to write music,
Yeah.
It's only when like I'm depressed, I'm lonely, I'm scared, I'm frustrated, I'm angry, I'm bitter. And that's when I pick up my guitar and look for answers.
Yeah. I mean, when I hear that, and when people hear that about you, uh, it doesn't come across that way in your music. So do you find that like sense of healing when you write it? Because I hear like a lot of optimism, and I hear a lot of, joy in the sound and energy and intensity and passion. I don't hear that like necessarily that shadow side in it. But I mean, I hear it in the lyrics, but I don't hear it in the like full on expression. So do you find like a healing point in the music where then it transforms into something that's like that light and that joy?
Yeah, maybe the music is almost the vehicle to arrive at a different destination than where the song begins. I think I've always felt like music is a vehicle that drives better than anything I've ever ridden in, and so it feels like it can take me places where no matter where I'm starting with, that's usually where I'm hoping to get, is somewhere where I couldn't get without the song.
Yeah. I hear, like when I'm listening to your music, I hear that sort of, not necessarily just the sound of the music, but I hear that voice or of like U2 or the Beatles, that sense of optimism, that sense of like, things are fucked up, but we're going to get through it and we can find this other side. How did you guys, I think of like your partnership with your brother, and I'm like, how do you ever come to any decision? Like what is that decision-making process to get to that, to get to the end of, here's the song we're putting out to the world? And I'm saying that because I have 1, 2, 3, 4 brothers, and I don't think I could make music with any of them. 5 brothers, including half brothers,
I mean, I think we figured out how to fight, like fighting well is what a friendship should be, because like two personalities are going to have differences. So there will absolutely be friction. And the question is, how do you deal with the friction? And there is a point where you say, we want to go in different directions. Okay, we need to probably get in different cars, But I think whenever I'm fighting with my brother, I think the two things that I remember are, first of all, he cares enough about this to actually fight with me, like, whereas a session bass player is going to be like, sure, you want me to play that? All right, whatever.
Yeah.
Give me my paycheck and I'm out of here, like, I don't care. I don't want to fight. I don't really care about this project. Whereas my brother really cares enough to like argue with me. And then the second thing is like that whatever his approach to the situation, he genuinely wants a better version of the song. Like the goal is the same. And that's actually something that I think of when I think of any endeavor where humans are attempting to go in the same vessel. Look at America. However much I disagree with somebody, I try and remember we both, at the core, if I'm thinking the best of this person, they actually genuinely want a better world. I have to believe that. That makes me at least say, okay, I totally think you're going about this the wrong way, but there's a shared humanity. I see a little bit of myself in you, no matter if I disagree or not. And that helps me. So I don't know, with my brother and I, there's no fist fights anymore. We just kind of, there's a lot more laughing and joking around.
I'm happy to hear that. My wife and I do a lot of work together. We built this hotel here together in Bali, and we run a nonprofit together. We do a lot of stuff. All decisions about my touring and music career, everything we decide together. We're really a team, and we found that we work best when we kind of just by default have found our own lanes. And we, she does really great things, and I do other things that are really great, and in some places they cross and they meet, but generally, like, I let her handle her side of stuff. Do you guys have lanes that you do like that you guys work in better?
Yeah, I think that's well said. And yeah, because I mean, if you're both making the same pot of soup, you know, it's just like, oh my gosh, this kitchen's too small. Let's get another project to work on.
What's it like when you finish a record and you go, Mom and Dad, or do you say, hey, Mom and Dad, here's our new record? Or do you send them songs in the process? Do you send them demos? I mean, it's really unique to have two parents who are both musicians.
I do. I get together with my dad every now and then. We talk music and my mom too. But yeah, they're pretty hands off, and we just kind of, I mean, they're very proud and I know that they support us, but they've kind of from the beginning kind of been like, hey, this is your path and you take it on your own and we'll be proud of you, you know? Yeah. I mean, when I dropped out of college, that was the first move where they were like, really?
What did they say? How did that go down? How did you tell them, first of all?
I mean, it was, you know, this is back in, probably early 2000s. And I think now I look at it and I mean, gosh, after the pandemic, everyone was learning remote. So like, it sounds absurd to say I had to go on tour and drop out of college, because now it'd be like, you can tour and you can be in college.
Yeah.
You know,
people are in law school and on a tour bus.
Right. So, but yeah, it's just this thing where a lot of the professors were saying, you know, you can't go on tour and still finish my class. And, and I think that it was kind of like a reluctant support, you know, where they're like, hey, it's your life. I'm not sure it's the right call, but you know, you go and do. So and that's tough, because I've got, you know, kids of my own, and I think that it's a really tough balance to say, hey, man, you're making some big moves, you know. I don't want to make them for you, but that's got to be a tough thing as a parent. I'm not there yet.
School costs, university is like a ridiculous amount of money now too. So it's like this huge like financial investment that could quickly become a burden if you're not, so I think it's really like the whole question of education these days has just been turned on its head. I was talking to a friend of mine about it, like early on in the pandemic. I was like, what are universities going to do now once everyone realizes like you don't actually have to go to a classroom or live in a dorm to make this work, you know? And schools kind of rely on that for their income, you know? But people are learning in so many different ways, and the model of what it means to be educated, quote unquote, is completely different. You know, as a father, how do you think about that with your own kids? Now, how old are your kids?
So I've got a 3-year-old and a 10-year-old. And my wife and I are both college dropouts. So, you know, you're like, I mean, and I do think that there's so many ways to become educated, you know. Like I said, travel is an education that is invaluable, you know, just to understand another side of a problem and different approach to a problem. I got a song on my solo project called Education. It says, here's an education you can't pay for, how to get up again and try. Here's an education you can't pay for, how to look me in the eye. All these things that you really can't learn in college, that you have to learn school of hard knocks, whatever you want to call it. But like, there's a growing up that happens that you can't get a degree for that. But that's the kind of person I want to be. That's what I want for my kids is to be the biggest version of myself. I want to see my son be the biggest version of himself, whatever that looks like, right?
It's a different world, you know. You guys made your most recent record during the pandemic, at the height of the explosiveness of the Black Lives Matter movement, of so many crazy, you know, this last election, of all these things that are happening socially and politically. And I know you guys have always worn that, you know, you've never been shy about speaking about it in music. And I'm just curious how this time has affected this, you know, your most recent record.
Yeah, it's a volatile time. And I think volatility is not to be feared in and of itself. I think
Mm.
it's like it's like the ocean, right? High tide, low tide. There's beauty in both, and there's danger in both, and you have to figure out how you're going to embrace what it is, you know. And I think the beauty of the time that we're living in is that people are truly questioning things, picking up this thing that's always been there, looking underneath it and saying, wow, why is this the way it is, you know? And so with the music, the current, the projects, we called it Interrobang, and it feels like an Interrobang is a punctuation mark that a lot of people don't know exists. It's a question mark and an exclamation mark at the same time. And I feel like that is the time we're living in. Question mark, exclamation mark, about everything, you know? Yeah. And so what does it mean to be American? What does it mean to be white, to be black, to be human, you know? And I think that these are, I come from kind of a philosophical background. I love the existential philosophers, Kierkegaard and all these people asking these deeper questions. And what I embrace about the times that we're living in is I think they evoke these deeper questions. And, you know, the lives that we live, if they're on the surface, you know, they run the risk of being really shallow, you know? So I feel like this time is a great, these ripples and waves kind of force us under the surface. And that's something that I take joy in, even though there are things that have been really difficult, relationships and upheavals that have been strange to live through. But there's beauty here too, you know?
Yeah. Have you guys been able to do any touring, any shows in the last couple of years, or you guys been pretty much off the tour bus? Or
we did one tour. We kind of snuck it in. It felt like at the time
Delta and Omicron.
Yeah, right. Oh man, it was at the time we were like, oh, I think we might be too early, and then we got out there, we're like, maybe we're too late.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a great tour. It was with friends, and it felt like we were, you know, trying to be really safe, and we had no cases among the bands of any form of anything. And you know, I think the other thing that I've taken away from the last couple of years is a deep gratitude for moments that otherwise I would have just taken for granted, you know, like even this moment, like talking to you, there's a richness where you're like, I want to take full note of the moment and really live in it and be present to it, because it is a gift, you know? So that is something that I've taken away from the past couple of years as well.
Do you remember what it felt like when you first walked out on stage, you know, on that tour after, you know, not being able to play for a while? What did that feel like for you?
Yeah. To be honest, it's a little bittersweet, because I felt like we did everything. We've done a live stream a month. We did it like on aircraft carriers and hot air balloons and like everywhere. We did all sorts of things. And then we did the drive-in shows with the cars and everything. So I thought that walking out on stage, it would feel like this tremendous victory. Like we'd put something behind us. And with, you know, it felt like it was, the bittersweet element was the fact that I wonder, I didn't feel like we'd put anything behind us. It felt like there's still a question of a doubt. Are we being safe? Should we have everyone in masks? Do we need to, you know, like, what does it look like to protect people? And that was the musical element was kind of overshadowed by this other thing that felt like it had a little bitterness in there. So it was a beautiful thing to go out on tour and to embrace the fact that we could be together and play music, but it had a little bit of bitterness as well in there, you know?
Yeah. I want to talk about surfing for a second, and just, I'm just curious, like, what age did you start surfing, and what role did it play in your life when you first started, and how has that evolved to now?
So we started the band as a 3-piece, my brother, myself, and our friend Chad, and all 3 of us surfers. And a huge part of our relationship is in the water. We still, many days I will drop my daughter off at school, meet my brother and Chad, and go surfing before we track any music or anything else, and I feel like that element of our relationship is a huge part of what keeps us together, and so the ocean is wild. Bali is amazing. We've surfed Bali many times. Ulu is one of our favorite places. Our buddy Tim, who lives there, he's put us up at his place a bunch of times, and I'm thinking of you in Bali right now, and I'm a little jealous, I
was at Uluwatu last weekend.
That's it, man. Oh man, what a spot. So, but there's this idea that, I was just looking at the Pacific with my son just before starting this, and you're looking out into, for all intents and purposes, the infinite, and you're aware of how finite you are in the face of the infinite. Much of human existence is staring at, these walls and these human contraptions and devices, and it can begin to feel like we humans are infinite. And when you look at the ocean, that's not the case. When you paddle out on a big day, that's not the case.
Yeah.
And so I do think that a big part of our lyrics and our drive, our understanding of our place in life, comes from the ocean, and I think that's a big part of who we are. There's this expression that I love on a big day that people will say, there's no atheists in the impact zone, which is to say, the most honest prayer is, God help me. And that's a prayer that I've prayed a lot of times in the ocean, and I think that's a beautiful place to be, in that awareness of your own mortality.
Yeah. And after you've gone out for, a surf session, and you're there with your brother and, you guys in your band, and then when you do arrive at the studio, does it feel different than if you didn't surf that day? Like
yes.
Creatively?
Yes.
Surf-wise?
Yeah, always. So I was talking to my friend who is he's a programmer, so very different industry. And we had just gotten out of the water, both walking back to our cars with boards in hands. And we were both saying how no matter what happens today, it's a win. I've got salt water running down my nose, and I think it puts all the things that I do for the rest of the day in its place. And I think, so there's an interesting thing with music. I'm sure you know this, like we're professional musicians, right? But you don't want to hold it too tight. You want to hold it like loosely. You want to hold it with open hands, If you hold it too tight, you begin to kill it, And I think surfing allows you, when you come in, you're holding everything loose enough to let it live and let it be vibrant, let it be alive while you're using it. You don't want to hold it too tight, strangle that song to death.
Yeah, I feel that. How do you know when you guys are done? You guys go through really intense journey, as brothers, as band members, working with producers, and how do you guys know when a song is done or when an album is done?
Well, I love the idea that music is never done. It's just released.
Yeah.
You never finish an album. You just release it, and it's almost that stranglehold where you're like, all right, here, we're going to let it fly.
Yeah. Let it fly.
And it's interesting. So I have been thinking about this a lot. Music, for millennia has been live music. It's only the last 100 years that it's been recorded music. And when we say music, we think of like something you can press play on your phone, you know? But music is the expression in the moment that's living and vital and integral to breath and human experience as it passes through time. It cannot be distilled or bottled up. The live that's what music is. The recorded experience is something that is, you know, completely tied to technology. And so that has kind of helped me release the recorded version, knowing that I'll be able to capture that anytime I want. And it'll actually be more alive when I play it with my bandmates in front of someone. The recorded version is less substantial than that experience in the moment. And so that's kind of allowed me to release anything, I suppose.
I've gone through a lot of that too. You know, when I think of, you know, just how I make records and how I get so into the minutia of things. Yeah. And like the times when I've thought of, you know, sending a mix back to a mix engineer and going, turn the shaker down 1 dB, you know, or no, turn it back up 2 dB. Yeah. No, turn, you know, kick drum is like, you know, there's just not enough 60 hertz in it, you know, like, and then like I listen back to the record later and it's like, all I hear is like the lyrics to the song, you know, like, does the beat sound cool? It's like, okay, cool. I'm singing along to it. It's like, you know, and for most listeners, that's their experience is like just the song, you know, and
it's like a feeling.
Feeling like, what does that song feel? And like that beat is cool. They don't know if the drum has 60 hertz or whatever, you know, they don't care. It's just how does it come across and is it in a feeling? And sometimes, you know, like I'm a huge fan of Bruce Springsteen. I've heard about like how he, you know, months working on one song, just on the mix of one song, you know, and at the end of the day, they're like, I love that song and it worked, you know, like whatever he did, it worked, you know? And so I can't really, you know, fault him. And sometimes I get into a thing of like, am I pulling too hard on this production and this song? Do I need to let it go? And then there's other times when I go, but gosh, you know, what made that song really cool is that I did like work on the kick drum for a long time.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Do you find that as you've grown and evolved, it becomes easier to let it go? Or do you find that you get more precise knowing ahead of time? Like, I kind of know like what works well for my voice or whatever.
Well, I have a different approach. I kind of, I think of songwriting as two voices in dialogue. I think of it as the creative kid, the child inside. And I think of the critic, that both of these voices have to be present to create good music. Like if it's just the kid, he's going to be writing about butterflies and Play-Doh and drywall. And you're like, oh man, these songs are kind of absurd and ridiculous.
That sounds like a really cool song to me.
I know, right? And then the critic is the guy who's in dialogue with this child, and he's saying that sounds like the Beatles, and no, that the kick drum it needs. Why did you do this? Why did we have to do this? And I feel like if it's only the child, it gets really abstract and doesn't really have tangible ties to reality. And if it's only the critic, you're never going to make music at all, you know? So I feel like, I'm always trying to find new ways to be a kid, like whether with a tuning I've never experienced before, or a new instrument or new subject matter. But when it comes to the mix, I really try and, find distance from it, because you know when you're like right up against the painting, you can't see anything. You're like just looking at brush strokes this big, and that's all you can see. Totally. It is funny, like if I have a chance to give myself time between a mix and the final thing, all the things that I really am obsessing over, 2 weeks from now, I'm probably not obsessing over. I'm like, I don't know if the lyric is right.
Yeah.
Like the kick drum's fine, but the song sucks or whatever it is.
I've been there. Jon, I got one final question for you. And it's a question I ask everybody who comes on the podcast, which is, what does it mean to you to stay human? How do you define what it means to be human, and how do you hold on to it?
Oh, so for me, to be human is to dream. I think that, I was just at the zoo earlier today with my friend's family and my family, and you're looking at all these animals, and I'm sure cheetahs and leopards and elephants have dreams, but they don't build cities, they don't write songs, they don't come up with ways, bridges or things like that, and I think that the human mind, from my perspective, I think, man, that is a spark there's a divine spark there, and when I see someone else, I want to be reminded that they possess that divine spark within them, that's they're created in that image, and that my worth, when I look at myself, to stay human means to be reminded of my worth in those terms, rather than my worth as a songwriter, as a father, anything else. It has to be subservient to that image first.
Right on, man. Jon, it's been awesome talking to you and just hearing your story and where this incredible music comes from. And for folks who are out there who are fans, are you guys going to be out on the road this year? Do you guys have a tour lined up?
We're scheming right now.
Okay.
So I hope to be out on the road soon, and man, I hope to get to Bali. That is a bigger goal right there. Let's
come
go.
Stay with me, man.
All right.
There's always room for you at my place.
Sounds good, man. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your heart. Great questions, man.
Yeah, thank you. And go check out Interrobang. And then if you're not familiar with their music, do a deep dive on just everything. There's so much, great music that's there. And I'm sure you'll find a lot that you will love. And on behalf of everybody listening, we want to say thank you to Gibson Guitars. Thank you to Jon Foreman, to your brother, the whole Switchfoot family, for being with us today on the Stay Human podcast.
Peace.